Some people walk into a room, and the room notices she was not that kind of person. At least, that is what everyone thought the moment she stepped through those glass doors. Name was Eleanor Voss. She was 63 years old. She wore a rain-dampened beige cardigan and sensible flat shoes, and over one arm she carried a simple canvas grocery bag, not a music bag, not a leather portfolio. Grocery bag. Her silver hair was pinned loosely at the back of her neck. Few strands had fallen free in the rain. She did not fix them. Her eyes were pale gray, almost the same color as the sky outside. Moved slowly and quietly around the lobby before settling on the front desk. She did not rush. She never rushed. The young man behind the reception desk was 22 years old. His name was Marcus Webb. He had been working at the Hargrove Community Music Hall for just 3 months. He had already learned the art of the polite professional smile, the kind that says, "I will try to help you, but I already know I cannot give you what you actually want." He looked up. He smiled that smile. "Can I help you?" Eleanor looked at him with those pale gray eyes, calm and hurried, completely still. "Yes," she said, "I would like to use one of the practice rooms, the one with the Steinway. If it is available." Marcus blinked. The Steinway, the 1962 Model D concert grand, most valuable instrument in the building, reserved exclusively for performing artists and faculty members and students enrolled in the advanced conservatory program. Not available for walk-ins, not available for the general public, certainly not available for elderly women in beige cardigans carrying grocery bags. Explained this as gently and as kindly as he could. Eleanor listened without interrupting. She did not frown. She did not sigh when he finished. She simply tilted her head just slightly, way a person does when they have heard exactly what they expected to hear and are completely unbothered by ID. "Understand," she said quietly, "but if you could check with your director, I would appreciate it." Marcus picked up the phone mostly to satisfy her. He expected a quick confirmation of his answer and a graceful end to the conversation. Described the situation to Director Linda Cho. Elderly woman walked in off the street, no appointment, asking for the Steinway. The line went quiet. "How old did you say she was?" 3. Another pause, longer this time. "Let her use the Steinway," Linda said. "Give her an hour." Marcus hung up the phone. He looked at Eleanor. She was watching him with that same small, unreadable smile. "Room B is all yours," he said. Eleanor thanked him. She adjusted the strap of her canvas bag, walked down the hallway as if she had done it 1,000 times before. What Marcus did not know, what almost no one in Cincinnati knew, was the story Eleanor Voss carried with her into that music hall. She had been born in 1956 in Vienna, Austria. Father was a music professor. Her mother was an amateur violinist, and Eleanor, even before she could read, could identify every single note on a keyboard purely by ear. By the age of 5, she was playing Mozart. By 8, she was winning youth competitions and drawing the kind of attention that made other parents go very quiet. At 12 years old, she was accepted into the Vienna Conservatory preparatory program, one of only 4 students chosen from across the entire country that year. Her teacher there was Professor Heinrich Boré, stern and brilliant man with sharp, angular features and silver-rimmed glasses and steel-gray hair swept back. A man who did not soften his words for anyone. Told her parents without any attempt to be gentle, "This child will either become one of the great pianists of her generation, or she will become nothing. There is no middle with her." He meant it as the highest compliment he knew how to give. Eleanor practiced 6 hours a day, sometimes 8. She learned Chopin and Beethoven, and raveled her hands even as a teenager moved across the keys with a precision and emotional depth that made professors stop mid-conversation to listen from hallways. At 17 years old, Eleanor Voss won the junior division of the Vienna International Piano Competition. Her photograph appeared in 2 newspapers Professor Bohr allowed himself a rare smile, and at 19 Eleanor Voss stopped playing, not because of a dramatic moment, not because of an injury, not because of a public failure. What happened was quieter than that, and in many ways much harder to explain. Her mother fell ill chronically and steadily, and without any clear resolution. Eleanor was the eldest of 3 children, and the only one living close to home. She became her mother's primary caregiver. The hours at the piano shrank then. They disappeared then. A full year passed without her touching one. She moved to the United States in her mid-20s. She married a structural engineer named David Voss. She raised 2 children in Cincinnati. She worked for 30 years as a hospital administrator, and she told almost no one about Vienna, not because she was ashamed, but because the past she had decided was the past. David died in 2016. Her children were grown and living in other states, and in the winter of 2018, sitting alone in her living room with the television off, Eleanor heard a piece of music on the radio. It was Schubert Piano Sonata number 21. She sat completely still for 47 minutes. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and began looking for a piano. Room B at the Hargrove Music Hall was warm and slightly dim. 2 high windows let in the soft gray March light. The Steinway sat at the center of the room like a sleeping animal, black and enormous and perfectly still. Eleanor set her canvas bag against the wall. She removed her cardigan and draped it over a chair. Then she stood in front of the piano for nearly a full minute before sitting down. She adjusted the bench. She placed her hands in her lap and looked at them, at the lines in her skin, age spots near her knuckles, the slight stiffness that cold mornings now brought to her right wrist, hands that had spent 40 years doing other things. Then she placed them on the keys. She started slowly, a simple C major scale, the kind a child plays on their very first day of lessons, and another, and a few broken chords, feeling out the weight of the keys and relearning the personality of the instrument. Then she paused. Then, without sheet music and without any preparation, she began to play Frederick Chopin Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Marcus Webb had not intended to stay in that hallway, but something had pulled him down toward that room, some instinct he could not name, and he had stopped just outside the partially open door and stood there listening. It took him about 15 seconds to understand that something extraordinary was happening, not because it was perfect, and was not perfect, not at first. There were hesitations, notes slightly misplaced, the left hand occasionally lagging behind where it clearly wanted to be. 40 years of silence does not dissolve in 15 seconds, but the architecture of it, understanding of what the music was doing, the shape of every phrase, way emotion was being placed with absolute intentionality. It was not the work of a beginner. It was not even the work of a good amateur. That was the work of someone who had once, a very long time ago, been extraordinary. By the time she reached the final section, the devastating and thundering coda, Marcus had his back flat against the wall in that corridor, not moving, barely breathing. When the last chord fell away into silence, he heard Eleanor Voss exhale. Then, after a long, long pause, she started again from the beginning. Director Linda Cho had not intended to eavesdrop. She had come down that hallway for an entirely ordinary reason. Scheduling matter, nothing more. But the music coming from room B made stopping involuntary. She stood in that hallway until the full hour was over, when Eleanor emerged calm and unhurried with her cardigan back over her shoulders. Linda introduced herself and asked if they could speak. They sat in Linda's small book-filled office. Linda poured 2 cups of tea without asking Eleanor, because she was the kind of woman who noticed such things and quietly appreciated them, accepted hers with a simple thank you. Linda did not circle around. "Heidi would like to know your background," she said, and Eleanor told her not all of it. she was not by nature someone who told all of anything to a near stranger. Enough Vienna, the conservatory professor bore the competitions. Stopping Linda listened without interrupting once. When Eleanor finished, Linda set down her cup and said the hall is hosting its annual spring gala. In 6 weeks, we have a featured performance slot, 40 minutes on the main stage. Our original artist had to cancel. I would like you to consider filling it. Eleanor looked at her steadily. I have not performed publicly, she said quietly. In over 40 years, I know, Linda said. I heard you play. I played imperfectly. You played magnificently, Linda said, with room to grow in 6 weeks. You will. The rain had started again outside, soft against the window behind Linda's desk. Eleanor sat with the silence for a long moment. She thought about the radio, about Schubert, about her living room with the television off, about the particular quality of silence that grief leaves behind. When it begins finally and slowly to lift, I will need to practice. Every day, she said. The Steinway is yours, Linda said. Every morning, 9 to noon. Eleanor looked at the window one last time, then she looked back at Linda. All right, she said. She picked up her canvas bag, buttoned her cardigan, and went home to begin. The evening of May 3rd, 2019, the spring gala at Hargrove Music Hall drew an audience of roughly 240 people. Music patrons and conservatory students and faculty and donors and community members who bought tickets for the pleasant tradition of a spring evening out. The program listed only featured solo piano performance, special guest, no name people. Asked, the staff smiled and said it was a surprise. Eleanor arrived early alone in a dark navy dress that her daughter had sent from Portland with a card that read, I still cannot believe you never told us. Go show them, Mom. She sat backstage in a wooden chair with her eyes closed for 20 minutes before her name was called. Marcus was assigned backstage duty that night. He sat nearby, pretending to check a clipboard. Are you nervous? He asked, surprising even himself. Eleanor opened her eyes. She considered the question honestly. I was nervous in Vienna, she said, at 17, with everything ahead of me and no idea who I was. Now I know exactly who I am and exactly what this music means to me. That is not nervousness, she said softly. That is something else entirely. She walked onto the stage. The house lights dimmed. The audience settled. Eleanor Voss sat at the Steinway and adjusted the bench in that now familiar way and placed her hands in her lap for one quiet moment. Then she began. She opened with batch, precise, and architectural, and illuminated from within by an intelligence that had spent 4 decades living a full human life and returned to music, carrying every year of it. The audience went very still. Then came the Chopin Ballade, the same piece Marcus had heard through a cracked door 6 weeks ago, but it was not the same performance. 6 weeks of daily practice, of muscle memory, reawakening of a woman in her 60s, quietly and relentlessly reclaiming something that had always been hers. Of it was present in every single phrase. When the final thunderclap of the coda struck the hall, several people in the audience flinched with the surprise of being emotionally ambushed by something they had not prepared for. Then she played the Schubert, the piece that had started everything. 47 minutes on the radio. The coat, the search for a piano. They walked down a long hallway toward a closed door, all of it leading here. She played it the way only someone who has genuinely lost things and genuinely survived them can play it, not with sentimentality, not with performance, but with the simple and devastating honesty of a person who has nothing left to prove and everything left to feel. When the last note faded, the hall was silent for 3 full seconds. Then the audience stood. Eleanor sat at the piano and looked out at 240 people on their feet. She did not cry. She pressed both hands flat against her thighs. She closed her eyes and she tilted her chin just slightly upward. Small private gesture of a woman, receiving something she had not known she still needed. Marcus Webb watching. From the wings said later that he had seen many performances in his time at the hall. He had seen technically superior performances, had seen more famous names on that stage, but I have never seen anyone play, he said, like they were finishing a conversation. That they started 40 years ago. Eleanor Voss went on to perform at 3 more events that year. She accepted a part-time artist residency at the hall. In 2020 she began offering master classes for advanced students. She still arrives every Tuesday morning with a canvas grocery bag. She still plays the 1962 Steinway, and she says she has no plans to stop.